Barrel Witch. Written and recorded by H.R Conover. Full stories can be found over on my Patreon. H.R Conover. Part 1. The garbage truck took huge, swinging steps across the flatter plains as it approached the junkyard lovingly named Pit. Like any good kingdom, Pit had huge walls reaching hundreds of feet high, protecting the people from something they couldn't remember, having the secondary use of containing a material that made up the homes, clothes, weapons, and scenery: trash. Most residents of the junkyard kingdoms were of the understanding that the walls protected them from the garbage trucks, much like the one that currently shook through the mountains and valleys that made up Pitt's first sector, surely waking regulars, disturbing the wraps from their hiding spots, and mixing some poor scrapper's stockpile gently into the surrounding trash. Cultists would soon be out to prey, and the cleaners would be hanging their heads in defeated frustration, but the divers were growing antsy. Feeling the shaking beneath their feet grow, final preparations were being made across the sector. Lantern light dotted the dark surface of Pit, and the moon casting glimmers across broken glass and plastic. The only light cast on the truck was the moon, as sharp reflections off the hard angles of the mechanical behemoth moved ever closer. "Aw, look at them legs, Check," Billy said, patting Check, eyes planted into homemade binoculars. "Must be more metal in one of them legs than the whole first sector." He quickly reached behind to the bag he used as a backrest, digging a blind hand around, causing the sounds of loose metal, before pulling out a separate lens he quickly attached to the front of his binoculars. "Kinda looks lost," Penny said as she rose to the floor, a malnourished youthfulness many residents of Pitt shared, poking through the general trash. She lay as if she were on a bed with her arms folded, moving freely without a single effort on her part. "Probably because it is," Check said. "Its actual head is behind the dumpster hanging off the front." "Wonder how it knows where to go then," Billy cut in. Penny rose from the trash. The bottles, cans, and junk formed around her as she sat up. Her eyes rose to meet the small boy's through the binoculars as she rested her head in her hand, elbow on knee. With a yelp, Billy jumped back, falling on his back. "Careful, Bill," Check said with a shake of his head. Picking up the bag he landed on. "Gotta look like we know what we're doing for the newbie." Raising the bag slightly, he continued, "Let's hope you didn't break these." "I'm not a newbie," Penny declared. "Sure you are," Check said, walking into the hideout. "Because until you're the one participating in debates about garbage truck anatomy, you haven't seen enough action." To this, Billy giggled back into his binoculars. "See?" Billy started as he still caught his breath. "Weird powers only get you so far with this line of work. But maybe if you listen to me, you'll—" He was cut off by an arm of trash reaching out from the cave wall, smothering him. Penny breathed a sigh of relief before sinking into the floor again, with a small laugh. Deeper into the hideout, sat at a lonely table, was Lady Brim, a knight of the cult Bottle. Check approached her with a familiarity not many in Pitt could say they had with a cultist knight, even though this was only their second time meeting. Her hood was propped up by large circular goggles that were customary of Bottle worshippers. Flowing fabrics hung off her shoulders, and tighter black rubber clothes fitted her waist and legs. Tall, thick boots sat cross-legged as she sipped a steaming liquid from a cap of her thermos. Hanging on a thin wire, a single bulb hung over Check and Lady Brim at the table, the light of which was either eaten or reflected by the jagged trash that made up the walls, floors, and ceiling of the hideout. Leaning against the wall, besides Brim, was her weapon of choice, a sword nearly her height, resting within its sheath. Check sniffed the air to only find an invisible punch to the face that made him straighten up. Divers were used to the smells that infected and mutilated their everyday lives. The cultists even enjoyed them, so why did Check smell jasmine tea flowing through the hideout? "I thought cultists only drank roach juice and ramp blood," Check said, setting Billy's bag down on the table. Without turning to him, Brim answered with a voice that made silk seem coarse. "Report me." "Just a question," Czech said with a smile. Brim took a sip with a satisfied sigh. Czech could only see the bottom half of her face, but she couldn't have been more than halfway through her 20s. "The Chosen seems a fine addition to your ranks, Czech," Lady Brim said, capping her thermos, placing it on her back with a click. "A shame one graced by the divine ended up being a dumpster diver." "Don't go getting any ideas, Brim," Czech said whilst reviewing a sheet of paper. "Besides," Czech unzipped the bag, reaching in, "cults aren't usually interested in anyone but themselves." "Oh, please, we both know I'm not your average knight." "Of course," Czech said, pulling out 2 bulky pistols that looked better suited for firing baseballs than bullets. "You trained them all, right?" "Well," a smile bloomed across her lips, "look who's spying on who now. Your group has enough power to rival the Ragas," he said as he heaved a large pill-shaped canister out of the bag and onto the table. At its midpoint was a valve and a fluid indicator, showing it to be full. On each end of the canister itself were long, thin tubes connected to nothing. Any normal person keeps an eye on the big dogs in the yard. But then again, your group wouldn't offer contracts to normal people, would they? "You have your little friend in the walls to thank for that. Something loophole, divine signals." Brim was cut off by a strong hand stopping her. Not physically, but like a parent ending a conversation. "We don't need a pair of goggles on Penny." He placed the canister on the lower part of his back, tubes sticking out from his sides that he then placed into the handles of the pistols. When he finished connecting the bulky pistols, he slotted them into holsters on his sides, with a satisfying brush of leather and clink of metal. Czech could feel the awkward tension in the air, but his protection over his team from the cultists, even a more laid-back member, was the top priority. "So when it says here," Czech started, leaning over a single piece of paper resting on the table, "retrieve the holy relic. You'll know what that is, right? You'll know what it is, right?" I was fast to accept a paid contract, but I don't want to be wandering too long, poking at every box that looks a bit shiny. "The relic is that of spider goddess Sharir, known to keep her possessions within barrels so they may remain clean." "So she's a cleaner goddess. I didn't think they had holy figures," Czech said until Brim cut in. "Clean, meaning the mortal realm." Brim stood matching Czech in height, "but we're also working with prophecies that only hint at what the true nature of the relic is, referred to as weapon, treasure, or prisoner, depending on the translator." She then lifted the sword from the wall, equipping it onto the top of her back. "So it could be a person," Czech said to himself. As if cued by his words, the signal flares near the wall rose high into the sky, eventually filling the hideout with a shining blood red. Reflecting off plastics and tins of the wall, dead-end by cardboards and cloth, Billy became silhouetted in the background of the garbage truck, finally at the wall of pit. "There they are," Lady Brim exclaimed, pointing to the glowing marks on the dumpster that pulsed with blues and purples, that pierced the oppressive red still shining. The marks of a spider web stretch across the lid. The wall itself had to be a couple of 100 feet high, and the truck was standing over it. "The dumpsters usually aren't that big, right?" Penny said as she poked her head out of the wall. With a thunderous drop, the garbage truck fell forward onto the wall, and the dumpster opened its lid, beginning to spew hundreds of pounds of trash in an endless steam, much like a fountain. The residents close to the wall, that were too stubborn to move before, began scurrying from the flood of material and sewage as their homes became pockets of space to be filled. "Here we go," Billy said as he rushed to fit his binoculars back into his bag. He looked away for only a moment, now having no way to see what was shimmering through this night sky. A washing machine, beyond repair, spun violently through the air towards the hideout, having been launched by the dumpster's initial opening. Penny was almost frozen, and Czech was simply too slow to do anything useful. But then the crew heard something akin to a gunshot. Just before Billy became materials for their cyclers, a flash of sparks and heat sliced the hunk of metal in two. The halves punched holes deep into the sides of the mountain with a force everyone felt in their gut, triggering a reflexive flinch even in check. Standing above Billy was Lady Brim. Her long sword's heated edge coated his cheeks with an uncomfortable warmth. Hanging off her lower back was a small engine that emitted a constant hum as the lights on its side glowed with a fiery red-orange. She looked out to the garbage truck, then turned to Billy with a hand outstretched. Billy fell in love, but check couldn't place on who it was directed towards, the person who made such a weapon, or the one using it. End of part 1. Part 2. "All right," Check shouted as he gathered the contract from the table. Billy and Penny already moving into position. "We've got Clip down there and not a lot of time to snag him." He walked to the mouth of the hideout's cave, where Penny sealed the entrance with a thick wall of trash behind him. Billy approached Penny with a collection of colored vials. White, blue, and purple, respectively. "Okay, Penny, remember what the vials mean, right?" "White's a stim, blue's a heal, purple's She took a long pause. "Sedative?" "Yes!" Billy bounced with joy as he handed her one of each vial, and then continued to the rest of the team. Penny began circling her arms in a constant spinning motion as if she were stirring a large pot with her hands. In response, trash from beneath each member of the team, minus Brim, started securing their feet as a dome of trash rose all around them, the glow of the vials being the only real light in the small room of trash, more a light for being seen than seeing the surroundings. "Ready!" Penny shouted. The team crouched, but Brim was still more or less lost on what was happening, not having received the footholds Billy and Check had. "Launch!" From outside of it, the ball Penny formed stretched and morphed like a sentient blob as it leaped off the side of the mountain, careening down towards the garbage truck. The wind whistled through old bottles and plastic and beat through rags and cloth from within. You could hear the cheers from Check and Billy as Brim screamed for dear life, wholly unprepared for what was happening. Large as it leaped off the side of the mountain, careening down towards the garbage truck. The wind whistled through old bottles and plastic and beat through rags and cloth from within. You could hear the cheers from Check and Billy as Brim screamed for dear life, wholly unprepared for what was happening. Large appendages shot from the ball, landing firmly on the mountain that came up to meet it. Every step the team moved faster. And with every step, the team moved faster, flying by residents. Okay, I'm just gonna restart. And with every step, the team moved faster, flying by residents and other hideouts with tremendous speed that seemed unnatural for an object of its size. The team heard something sharp, scratch, and cut trash, but what they couldn't see was Brim, who had kept herself still with the help of her sword, planting it into the ground without heating the blade. The ear-shattering event of hundreds of pounds of trash hitting the ground from 50 stories high could be heard for miles. As the team approached, it only grew louder, mashing with the intense wailing of the wind from the blobs rushing through it. "Where the hell is Clip?" Billy cried out. "Should be here soon." But before Check could finish, something shot through the bottom of the trash blob, nearly hitting Check and Billy. The boys shrieked it to the amusement of Penny, who still controlled the beast with both of her arms behind her, hands planted into the walls up to her forearms. 2 headlamps Billy wore on his temples kicked to life to reveal what punched through the ride was still there in the form of a thick cable, and a metallic shine reflected off the continuous edges of the rope like metal. "Who's the newbies now?" Penny said before several more wires shot through the interior in random directions, all having the same punch of a bullet. During the second barrage, there were screams from everyone, but a pained yell from Brim. Turning the light to Brim, Billy saw the tall woman kneeling as best she could as the cable grazed her leg. Blood moved down the cable's length, splattering around her as the trash beast continued moving. Outside, the team was nearly to the garbage truck as containers still showered down from the dumpster, but now, atop Penny's blob, was a rider. Thick cables in each hand, tough overalls ruffled in the wind, with a large coil that fed wire from each side on the back. The small frame the thick overalls hung from also wore large gloves that seemed to burn red hot while keeping their shape. One hand was low, holding 2 taut cables together that pierced through the top of Penny's creation, while the second was above their helmet, swinging the cable like a whip preparing to strike. Finally, at the wall, the rider sent the cable in the free hand flying towards the now towering behemoth, not landing anywhere near the truck, but on the wall, which it hung over. With one strong motion, Penny's blob retracted its arms and sprang up, leaving a good bit of trash behind. In a repeating motion, trash routed its way up the cable onto the wall, using it as leverage for another leap, as the rider sent out another cable that stuck into the concrete wall. The result of this process was a now climbing mass of trash that, if seen from the hideout, seemed nothing more than a bug crawling up to the truck. Reaching the top of the wall and beyond, the team flew in an arc above the monstrous truck. The blob stretched out to catch itself and cushion the fall, keeping the team safe as they braced the landing, turbulent even with precautions. Czech landed with a roll. Penny gently lowered herself down a column of trash, and Billy slammed against the hard metal top of the garbage truck with a reverberatory thud. Lady Brim, however, skidded along the top, flailing out of control as blood spewed in a weak shower around her. Czech stood to give chase, Billy reached out a hand in pain, and Penny sat back into a self-made chair. But after a moment, the familiar shine of Brim's heated blade erupted as she stuck it into the smooth metal, carving a long gash, out of control as blood spewed in a weak shower around her. Czech stood to give chase, Billy reached out a hand in pain, and Penny sat back into a self-made chair. But after a moment, the familiar shine of Brim's heated blade erupted as she stuck it into the smooth metal, carving a long gash as she came to a stop. Billy's headlamps cut through the weak moonlight, giving Brim's landing the look of a ruined runway. As she stuck it into the smooth metal, carving a long gash as she came to a stop. Billy's headlamps cut through the weak moonlight, giving Brim's landing the look of a ruined runway. Kneeling, propped up on her sword, she held her leg, taking deep breaths. As Czech ran over, the rider landed next to Penny, wire rope spinning itself back into their spool with a mechanical zip. "Wow, Clip, I knew you hated cultists, but you didn't have to kill her," Penny said as she reclined into her trash pile. "That's right. Tonight's the cult job," Clip said, partially muffled by the motorcycle helmet he wore. Whatever, Billy said as he crawled his way to Penny and Clip, words slurred from pooling blood. "She happens to be very important at the dite and the organization." His voice took on a scrunch sound. "As you saved my life." "You just think she's hot," Penny said, cutting Billy off. His response with a face of cartoonish appallment, stating, "Penny, she is a lady of Patel, and frankly, I would never objectify a woman of her stature." "It's probably just because of the sword," Clip said, ignoring Billy. To this, Billy had nothing else to say, as he mentally scrambled for a rebuttal. "Why are you still on the ground?" he asked Billy. "Oh, right," Billy said, realizing his predicament. "I need a stim from the bag, but I can't feel anything." "That's rough, Bill," Clip said, producing a vial of blue, luminescent liquid. "What do we practice landings for if you're still going to use your face?" Over near Lady Brim, Czech had finally reached her, and she still hunched forward in pain. He reached to his side and produced one of his pistols, disconnecting the tube while keeping a tight pinch on the end. He swiftly produced a glob of blue paste from the tube onto his palm as he knelt with Brim, reaching out his hand without the paste to remove her own that pressed down on her leg. Moving a hand off the sword that was now stuck in the ground, Brim fell to her side. She allowed her hand to be moved from her leg almost instinctively, but lashed out when she saw the blue paste. Swatting his hand away, she said, "How dare," venom dripping from her words, "to pull me from Patel, you blasted heretic!" She fell to her side and scooched away on her rump. Blood still slowly poured from her wound as she did so. "It's just to help it heal, Brim. You gotta relax." "You would use cleaner tools on me, diver. What reason would I have to stay calm?" She leaned on her elbow opposite her wound, and in a whisper she said to Czech, "Do you think they all hurt that?" Her voice had changed from a dignified woman to that of an actual person in pain, small heaves in between words and grunts as she moved. "What? God, Czech, whatever, just get that on me." She reached out a hand and pulled his own, holding the paste onto her leg, covering the wound in a light blue that brought out a heavy moan from Brim as the healing already started. He felt the strength of her leg and her breath on his neck as he stumbled forward. After a few moments of almost savoring it, she finished and stood testing if she could walk normally. Czech only watched to make sure she would be okay, but that didn't mean it wasn't pleasant to watch her walk away. Hey! Far away, Penny shouted, "Cut the foreplay, will you? We got a dive to do." End of part 2. Part 3. Beneath their feet, all of their feet, on the flat metal of the garbage truck's top were the designs that glowed with a gentle light. Webs, large and small, reacted to the steps of the team as they made their way to the front. Passing the gash in the metal she made, Brim took only a moment to peer down into the cut, seeing complex mechanical structures of spinning gears and violent pistons. Clip was already checking something in the ground towards the front and explaining it to Penny when Check arrived. "Everyone ready?" Check said to the crashing sound of trash the dumpster spewed. "Well, we were gonna tag it up, but we were the first," Clip said with a shrug. "Wanted to check if that was okay." "Definitely not normal, but this is a god truck or something, so..." Check thought for a few moments. "Go for it. It's the 25th, I think." With their leader's blessing, Clip showed Penny how to tag the top of a garbage truck, using a can of spray paint, a knife, or anything to leave a mark. Dumpster divers left a tag and date to show who went in when, almost like a sign-in sheet. As the twins finished up, Billy ran to each member, checking their basic equipment. He announced the items he looked for, resupplying them without a second thought from the bundles in his bag. As he ran checking hip lamps, box cutters, gas masks, and trash bags, Check watched the stimulant dangle off his forehead as he moved, almost as if he were a unicorn. It wobbled on its anchor, smacking its side to his head whenever he turned. "Why the hell does he have a stim already?" "Oh, don't worry, Check," Billy said as he hopped on to Check, planting his feet on Chick's hips, hands holding on top his shirt, speaking fast enough for Check to need a moment to process what he said. "It's going to be totally fine because I'm going to make sure that I don't crash while I'm in there. No sirree, I'm going to be all good." But before Check could comprehend his words, Billy was already down near his pistols, making some final adjustments. Check nodded to Penny and called the group together in a small huddle. The trash blob reformed around the group, minus Clip, who wrapped a cable around the blob that then absorbed the wire. Looking across the space to the dumpster, Clip attached the other cable to the top rim, pulling it taut. Jumping off the small pile of Penny's trash that she launched him with, Clip started pulling on the wire attached to the dumpster, forcing his push into an arc. The team followed behind, slaves to momentum and gravity, as they were whipped around Clip and flung into the mouth of the dumpster. The trash spewed all manner of broken appliances, food scraps, and random debris, but it wasn't from the actual contents of the dumpster. A pulsing black ball that shone with periodic flashes of yellow and orange rings. From this ball, seemingly just floating in place, came the trash that graced Pit, but left enough room for them to move past the stream right to the ball, which is exactly what they did. Passing through, Clip rode into the pocket dimension on top of the blob, keeping them upright. Clip detached his cable that led out of the portal, planting the now free cable up into the ceiling. As it was planted, there was a wet popping sound from the ceiling. Gracefully hanging from the high ceiling in the dark, the blob deformed, resting the team on the slippery floor. Wherever they were was completely dark, the rumble and commotion of hundreds of pounds of trash being replaced with a silence that wrapped its arms around you, a darkness that placed millions of gentle hands over your body. There was a sound of Clip's wire spooling, a click of reattachment, and then the team's bind fell as the cable retracted. Shaking off the trip like a professional, Check turned on his hip lamp, twisting the top so that its light could escape, painting the room in yellow. The team followed suit, and soon the entire room was revealed, albeit dimly. Dripping. The walls dripped and drudged as if they couldn't support their own weight. There wasn't a speck of color anywhere, only a mix of black and brown. Having difficulty with the strange lamp, Brim took a few moments longer to properly shine a light, needing help from Billy. When she did, however, what shambled toward her was nearly upon her. The loose shape of a person not running but not walking either, with none of the natural movements associated with directed effort. This being of sludge stretched out to grab her, but the knight was too well trained for a surprise like this. In a flash, her heated blade sliced through the being 3 times before anyone else even processed the sound of her sword. Brim stood ready to strike again, waiting for the being to fall, but it did no such thing. Where her sword passed through the body had only hardened. Its head, shoulder, and a long line through the torso seemed to dry momentarily, but returned to normal quickly, removing no material. Turning to see the outcome, Czech understood what needed to be done. Producing his right handgun from his holster, he flicked it to the side hard, changing the cylinder that sat behind the barrel, firing a single shot that careened through the air. A blue flash, announced by the sound of sharp pressurized air, landed on the head of the sludge creature. It squirmed and writhed to the ground with a soaked yell. A moment later, it bubbled away and dissolved into nothing. "Careful there, Brim," Czech said as he holstered the pistol. "Come on," he said to the group as they all, minus Clip, started walking in unison down the only way to go. Brim was still breathing heavily from the shock as she looked around. No more of the being shambled towards her. Clip almost seemed relaxed as he took a seat, and the rest of them were almost out of the room. "So what do you get? Do you just get to relax?" Brim said, looking back at Clip. He didn't offer a response. Not one she could see, anyhow. He only sat, cable leading out of the portal. "Don't do anything stupid," Penny shouted as she left the room behind Czech. I'm only inquiring why." "Not you," Billy said as he wrenched the now empty vial off his forehead. "She's talking to Clip." Brim looked back at the masked face that still only quietly looked at her, not relaxed, but ready. Heading down the corridor, Czech had both pistols out and primed with cleaner solution. Behind him was Penny, then a calmed Billy, ending with Lady Brim. The floor beneath them sank lightly with each step. The walls were a mix of casted shadows and protruding trash. The ceilings of the corridors was only barely visible. Only when looking up, however, did Lady Brim notice the warm breeze that flowed endlessly towards them. "Got one," Czech said as he tapped the top of a cardboard box that fit snugly in the wall. He continued forward, leaving retrieval to Penny, who only needed to reach out a hand for the wall to simply give her the box. Producing a box cutter from her hip, she made small movements, eventually sharing its contents with Billy. A pack of 4 drawing pads, wrapped in plastic, traded hands from Penny to Billy. Making quick taps on a small machine attached to his hip, a mechanical sort of hum and cut left Billy with a sticker. Slapping the small white rectangle on the package, it was now labeled Drawing Pads K-1 S-3. Hearing from Penny and Billy's chatter, Czech chimed in. "We'll need some loose paper around for the next project. Keep 2 instead." Billy, in response, typed on his device again. Only this time much shorter, placing it over the previous, so now it read Drawing Pads K-2 S-2. Satisfied, Billy grabbed a small roll of plastic that sat next to the labeling machine, flapping it out and revealing it to be a small trash bag. Then, placing the drawing pads in, the bag grew only slightly to accommodate the pads, then kept its new size. Brim had only heard of these tools, the trash bags, from small talk around local markets, almost exclusive to divers after having stolen the cleaner supply of them nearly a decade ago. Made for organization and transport, reusable, and nearly indestructible. Brim found herself more fascinated than disgusted by the cleaner's tools. Continuing down the corridor led to a few rooms they visited and searched. None held the relic, but there was a various sludge creatures dispatched by Czech, cardboard boxes retrieved by Penny, and then opened and organized by Billy. Each time the trash bag grew larger, going from a dangling pouch on Billy's backpack to something that needed to be slung over his shoulder, opposite his bag. "You try to clean, to organize, in a holy site such as this?" Brim asked. "Big talk for the only one here wearing goggles and a full bodysuit," Penny shot back, not even giving her a taunting glance. Brim started building up a heated response, but was cut off by Czech. "Heads up." Czech crouched, signaling the others to do so as well. Got a swarm, then relic room. As the team of divers crouched, Brim found herself confused by what she could only see down the hall, or more accurately, what she couldn't see. There was only one figure down the hall, but what she heard was this squirming so quiet that one might think it was intentional. Billy tapped Brim's leg to follow their lead. She did so and saw Billy fumbling with a vial of white stimulant and a precision injector. Penny began forming trash from the surrounding walls and floor behind Czech in almost a seat. Czech held both his pistols together, the tops meeting each other in front of him, and a mechanical hum and clicking sound erupted from them both. Brim couldn't see what was happening, but the canister on Czech's back lit up as the sounds of escaping pressure grew with intensity. The glow of the blue grew brighter with each passing second. "Hey, Brim, what's your god's name again?" Czech asked. With hesitation, Brim responded, "It is the goddess Batel of—" But she couldn't finish. Hundreds of silhouettes, clawed hands, and massive bodies of sludge protruded from the walls with the crushing weight of their wet, slimy screams. Then, before the mass that caused the shaking beneath their feet reached the team, Billy stuck Czech with a stim. A jet of cleaning potion erupted from Czech's pistols, the force of which pushed him back into Penny's brace. Raising his weapon, Brim could now see his pistols had combined into a single-barreled weapon with handles on the sides. Like a knife through fresh mud, the blue beam cut through the horde that charged at them. With a shout, Czech said, "Now!" And Penny turned a dial on the canister Czech sported. The beam grew in diameter from the size of a rat to nearly the width of the hallway, punching against the wall of sludge that, despite everything, still pushed forward. A glimmer shone above Czech, A glimmer shone above Czech and, with quick thinking, raised the blast in a mighty sweeping motion. In response, Penny shifted the angle of the brace, blood starting to drip from her nose, paired with the veins reaching across her forehead. Billy then reached Penny's hip, taking her vial of white stim and sticking her with a small dose. Her struggle seemed to grow manageable. Then, all at once, it was over. Czech's guns fell to his side, separated again. Penny wobbled as Billy helped her keep her balance. The hall was clear, the trash that made up the walls, floor, and ceiling, all perfectly clean from grime and gunk. Despite her teachings, Brim was grateful to see the unnatural shine of white and black tiles on the ground. "Gods," Czech said, catching his breath on a bed of trash. "Maybe there's something to your gods. After all." The three divers laughed. After a moment of recuperation, the team made their way into the final room. Much larger than any of the rooms before, the relic was on display beneath a magnificently carved statue of a human spider hybrid. She was easily 50 times the size of a normal person, blindfolded, grasping down with a soft hand just out of reach of the relic. The steps leading up to the relic were circular, the whole structure looking like a shallow pyramid. Approaching the relic, a tall box maybe up to Czech's hip. Billy was the first to hit his face on the invisible wall. From his contact, a shine of yellow reached around the top platform, stretching up back to the statue's hand. With a quick test from the other two divers, it was found that only Penny could pass through the barrier. Brim was nearly in tears at the sight of this statue silently allowing the divers to work. The opportunity to witness the divine, interact with forces she was only now beginning to understand. The relic itself was a tall cardboard box at the moment. With the snaps of tape that held the box together, Penny made one final cut. The box's shape disappeared as it fell to the ground, a flat piece of cardboard revealing a barrel. "Well, I guess that's one part of the prophecy that was right," Czech asked, but found no response from Brim. The team, minus Brim, moved around the barrier, studying the rusted red barrel, while Billy scratched his head. "Last centerpiece was a couch, right?" "Yeah, but that was a normal truck," Penny replied. "You'd think a holy relic would be a touch more useful." Billy put a curled fist to his chin. "It's what's held inside, I believe," Brim said quietly. "Would you and the cult want it as it is, or only what's inside?" Czech asked, but Brim took a long moment before answering. "The cult and I, huh?" Brim said, allowing the question to linger for a moment. "Did you know that when I joined the cult of Bottle, I was only 5? She asked. "I was wandering around Pit without a family, a little girl who would fight off the giant rats of Sector 4 with a metal pipe she found." "What's this got to do with—" Penny started but was cut off. "They offered me scripture and a purpose. A better pipe to fend off bigger rats, one that was sharp and powerful. The title of Knight, a reason to wake up and smell the rot." She was breathing heavily like she had when she was in pain, but that's not even close to what I needed. She took another moment, breathing through the beginnings of tears, looking at the ultimately confused team. "I needed
Food. She removed her goggles, gripping them in strong hands. Tears that had been stored by the bulky goggles fell, cleaning her suit-covered skin as they fell. So if I needed to wield a sword to get it, I would. She quieted, looking to the statue. I just never expected. What? Penny shouted. For the gods to be real? Of course they are. They are the foundation of the eternal cycle, the connection of destruction and rebirth, pillars of the forever mess, holy filth of the world. Brim finished through habit. Don't you dare speak the doctrine to me. Brim gripped the hilt of her blade, still sheathed, while she took a defensive stance. Or should I believe everything I hear, you filthy little half-breed? Guys, let's calm down, Czech said. You're on, you old hag! Penny lunged forward, forming huge arms and legs that made of the trash from the walls and floors. Czech tried one last time to gain their attention, but was stopped by two familiar metal cables zipping into the room, anchoring into the concrete base of the relic's platform. Snapping taut as Clip entered from the dark hallway, the glass of his helmet smashed, revealing hard eyes. Flying past Brim and Czech, Clip slammed into Penny with the full force. Knocked out of her trash body, the pair flipped through the air, the flash of purple sedative registering in Czech's mind. Brim still stood in a ready stance with sword sheathed, but the look in her eyes told Czech that wouldn't last long. Czech! Benny yelped, staring down the hallway. Through the sight of his binoculars, we've got cultists! Brim's face dropped from disbelief into panic. Brim, listen to me. It's gonna be all right, Czech began, but with an instantaneous step, Brim held her sword to his throat. Although the blade burned his skin, he knew if he didn't do something soon, she would do a lot worse. You can come with us. I'm no diver, Brim said through curled lips. Well, you don't seem like much of a cultist either, so... To this she brought her face close to his, getting an even better handle on her sword's position. We have food? End of part 3. Part 4. The sounds that came down the hallway could only be described as a mess. Crunching trash under dozens of feet, a steady, low hum, and, of course, the scattered laughter. One voice was deep, but the others were sharp. Before the source of the noise was revealed, the sound of Lady Brim's sword, the sound of heat, and the generator responsible, overpowered the messy concoction. A single blade cutting through the darkness as it grew to full length, casting a weak light on its wielder and those next to him. Each one, though, casting a reflection off their large goggles, like stars of the night sky that could look down and watch you squirm. Only a moment passed after the sword was revealed, before that same sword came shooting forward into the room. The fact it was a fellow knight of Bottle only registered as an afterthought. With a great shout and swinging arc, his blade was nearly down upon Brim, who was on this expedition for a good reason. Almost effortlessly, she stepped to the side, moving Czech as well, dodging the heavy strike. The new knight's blade slammed into the ground, cutting through a solid foot of concrete. For only a moment, he was stuck there. But that was more than enough time for the blade of Brim to move off Czech's neck, down through the knight's. Any blood that would have started spewing was halted by the instant cauterization of his fatal wounds. Czech, Billy, and Clip shared a moment of surprise. The laughter that followed, a brief silence, however, was beyond unexpected. Yes, a robed man said as he entered the chamber. This makes it so much more official. His robes bore the mark of Bottle, and so did the knight's armor that was currently being eyed by Billy. Those that entered behind him were around 5 knights and a couple dozen foot soldiers, with him and another older man, who wore the same robes. What is this? Brim exclaimed. This was supposed to be my mission and mine alone. She held the sword out to them on guard. Well, the younger man replied with sarcasm, it was until you broke the code and killed one of your own. A laugh from the knights and himself erupted. Henceforth you are relinquished of your title and made for execution. No! Brim screamed, falling to weak knees as she pushed the hilt of her sword into her forehead. Billy hurried over to help her stay upright. "What's the matter? Now you can enjoy your food without forsaking the name of bottle." Readying 2 pistols and chambering the correct rounds, Jack aimed them at each of the priests, pulling triggers that would have blown the tops of their skulls a mile high, if he didn't use up all the pressure during the hallway's rush. Looking for another option, he noticed Penny had finally been wrangled by Clip, arms and legs bound together, kept from using her powers in such a way that would make things worse. Patting his pockets, Chuck searched for his backup stims as the brat of a pastor rambled on. Chuck turned to toss over 2 vials of stim to Clip, but felt a familiar pinch in his neck. From that pinch came a warm mass that entered his skin, flooding out like a pool pocketed by his internal structure. He reached up quickly to remove it, only to find that familiar purple sedative had almost been fully drained. Looking up to the group, he saw that a cultist had fired a vial from within the crowd. The first thing he lost was his balance, then his ability to move his arms. He looked around the best he could and saw the same flash of purple on Brim and Clip. Billy was currently being dragged around by one of the more brutish guards, being forced to watch something that was about to happen. Looking at Clip and Penny as if his eyes were suspended in drying glue, Chuck saw another knight appreciate Clip's bindings as she carried away Penny. The only thing Chuck could do was try with all his might to pull his hand by his fingers to the vial of stimulant lying just out of reach on the ground. Brim was already unable to truly move, for the sedative, but now she could barely think. The last 2 guards, old friends of hers, Janelle and Jocko, held her arms back as the priests stood between her and the barrel. The bottle priests were fascinated by the barrel, the young man dancing slightly as the old one pored over his book, confirming something within himself. Billy had not been sedated, but left to squirm in the near iron grip of the large knight. With every new attempt spawning more laughter from the nameless bottle knight, he watched them draw and quarter Brim. Chuck feebly reached for stims, and Penny's unconscious body, wrapped in her brother's wire, became nothing more than a human backpack. "This is quite the 2-for-1 deal, Teresh," the older priest said. "Of course it is, Yellow. Nothing I do is ever for a single goal," Teresh, the younger priest, replied. "The spawn of Ben captured, the host of the Barrel Witch being one of our knights." Yellow closed the book with his crooked, bony hands. "Quite the day indeed." Billy heard the words and didn't care what they had meant. Whatever the cult saw his team as was none of his business. What they would do to them was his business. Far above the mark of scrapper, he was a diver, and the divers don't just leave good pieces behind. The same went for a good team. Reaching into his pocket, he gripped his screwdriver harder than he'd ever had before, imagining how Brim had moved with her sword earlier. As Brim slouched forward, her head was yanked up to look at the barrel. She also saw Chuck, finally resting a hand on one of the stim vials. The foot soldiers who had made up the entire entrance of the room began a quiet hum that Brim recognized as a summoning chant. The room became flooded with the rhythmic force of their voices, spawning anxiety that scrambled Brim's senses. Yellow placed a hand on his barrier, and it shone that constant yellow hue, but he didn't move it. But he didn't remove his hand. He began low, speaking in tongues long forgotten from his other book, which had the depiction of a spider on its cover. As he spoke, he grew louder, almost singing along with the soldiers. The barrier fluxed and wavered. Finally, the barrier faded away like a mist, and the knight holding Penny approached the barrel without a problem. The knight unceremoniously smashed Penny's head alongside the barrel's top edge. Blood poured from the open gash along her forehead, covering the barrel in a thick coating. The whole team, minus Billy, tried their best to scream and move, but only produced muffles of a weak, pulsing movement. Billy's screams ripped apart the harmonic song of the cult, and his movements were pure violence, not trained in combat of any kind. He gripped his screwdriver as tightly as he could and sent it careening towards his captor's wrists. Squeezing his eyes as he did so, he felt the tool enter something, and then the large man's hand loosen entirely. With new freedom, Billy honestly had no idea what to do. His instincts told him something was happening to Brim, so that's where he went. No other tools in his pockets, his bag out of reach. He felt only a loose stem within its ejector. He felt only a loose stem without its injector. Gripping that, he rushed to Brim before the others could notice and dove to her vial first. The vial stuck into her leg. The entire vial was emptied almost instantaneously. But as this happened, Billy also saw the barrel had changed. There was a door on the barrel, like a side panel that had unlatched, exposing darkness shrouded in a veil of dripping blood. Before the vial could take effect and the knights could realize what happened, Billy felt his hands and feet move on their own to get between Brim and the barrel. Inside the barrel, with the faintest hint of form from the room's light, was a woman. Her gentle gaze rested on folded hands, naked and pale, sinister, deadly, a primordial mental trigger that warned of a predator, yet Billy faced it head on, protecting Brim. Czech watched what Billy had done, from the gamble with escaping in the night to the barrel door opening. Sticking Brim with a stem was the right call, even though he knew Billy was scrambling. The vial he reached for finally went into his hand, nearly close enough for the auto-injector to do its thing, when something erupted from the barrel. It was a leg, not a human or rat leg, more like a jointed, thick spike that careened through the air right into Billy's chest. He had spread his arms in defense of Brim. Perhaps he knew what would happen, maybe not. Regardless, the giant leg had pierced a hole through Billy so suddenly that it hoisted him into the air. More legs poured from the barrel door, like a molting spider. Then, all at once, the body that sported the legs emerged. Larger than the barrel could ever hope to contain, a beast rose high above anyone else in the room. The body of an ideal woman with monstrous appendages that resembled spider legs. Choir cultists continued their singing through their fear. The knights instinctively took a knee, and the diver crew mourned the loss of their scrapper. The stim Czech had been working on finally connected, and within seconds he felt his body returning to normal. He started crawling as quickly as he could to Clip with the second vial of stim. He couldn't stop checking on the new monster in the room as she picked up Billy's limp body. The knights who held Brim at the ready had abandoned their duties in favor of emergency prayer in the face of the divine. She stole back her sword and made a break for Billy's body, but was swatted away by one of the 8 gigantic legs. Brim's body flew away, slamming into Czech as he had finally reached Clip, who remained unconscious on the ground. Past the monstrosity, Brim saw a bound Penny being rushed away down a hall and cursed her ill judgment. The so-called Barrel Witch then reached down and picked up Billy's body, holding it up to her face. "No, no, no, witch!" Teresh had begun screaming. "You're to eat the woman you just slaughtered!" But his shouts held no weight. As fast as you could blink, one of the spider woman's legs slammed into Teresh, sending him hurtling even faster than Brim had, disappearing into the wall of trash. From the hole he made came a steady gushing of blood. "It seems you've mistaken me for one of your gods," the Barrel Witch said, her voice carrying easily through the entire room. She held Billy's body to her face, and with a long, flowing tongue cut gashes into his back in a strange shape. "I'm flattered." She then spoke a single word to Billy's body, and from the holes already pouring blood came an unnatural pressure that never let up. More blood than could ever have been held within his small body shot with speed unendingly from the wound on his chest and back. "But what I am scares their kind far too much to anoint me a goddess." She then ripped his body in half. Across his midsection, the loose halves flung from her grip like toys as she spun them around, showered herself in his blood. Most of the cultists had made it out of the chamber, and Clip was only now catching his bearings. Beaten and drugged, the team of Brim, Czech, and Clip made a break for the door. As they passed the witch, the floor began glowing. As the witch spun and danced in their former partner's blood, her legs carved a distinct but complex runic symbol on the ground. Its glowing stopped the witch's dancing as she shoved Billy's body into her mouth. The team made it to the door when the glow turned blinding, shielding their eyes with their arms even as they looked away, but Czech's curiosity took over. He turned back to see the result of the glow sat atop the barrel. Cleaner than he had ever seen anything was a woman. The monster was gone. The bodies of the priests and knights still scattered around, and Penny was nowhere to be seen. Alone was this woman, the Barrel Witch, running from her were the remnants of a diving crew with the newest addition. Rounding a corner, the team heard her cheers, laughing aloud, thanking them as they ran. The team made it to the portal's entry, where Check and Brim discovered the results of Clip's guard duties. Piles of bodies around the room, separated by faction. Jumping through the portal, the three of them fell back into pit from the mouth of the dumpster with the secure line Clip had left for their return. Lowering the three of them in a rush, they slammed into the still settling fresh trash. There was no cultist still alive around the landing site, but that didn't stop Clip from lashing out his cables to the different points of high ground, searching for Penny's captors. Brim sluggishly propped herself up with her sword as she attempted to move through the loose trash, and Check nearly decided to lie there forever, looking up to the dumpster that had run out of trash to spill. The final thing passed through the portal was the monstrous form of the Barrel Witch. Her landing shook the neighboring mounds of trash, knocking both Clip and Brim off balance, even though they were completely different areas. The witch's monstrous squirming did much of the same, eventually gaining strong footing on the trash mounds, scuttling into pit with a familiar laughter. Check had remained on the ground and watched the dumpster heave back over the walls, feeling the squirming steps of the witch disappear, most likely transforming back into a human form, along with the steps of the garbage truck, which became fainter and more subtle as it made its way back across the flatter plains. End of The Barrel Witch. You can read this full story. Make sure to check out the other readings if you enjoyed. And I just want to say thank you for staying this long. And I hope you enjoyed Barrel Witch.